Well, hello and welcome to the 8th episode of our podcast for Strasz Assessment Systems Beyond the Test, Strasz Talks. And I'm really pleased to be joined by a very long-term colleague in the industry today. I'd like to welcome Sue Orchard, who is the head of CommsMultilingual, an organization that does translation and adaptation for assessment organizations, as well as a number of other instances. And I'll let her talk a little bit about that.
Mhm.
But Sue, after knowing you and working together so long in the industry, it's just a delight to have you on here today.
Oh, thank you very much for that very kind welcome, Rory. It's great to have the opportunity to have a chat with you today.
Fantastic. Sue, just tell me a little bit about your company, CommsMultilingual, as well as your role, for those who might not know you.
Okay. I set up CommsMultilingual 21 years ago now. I think I'd always wanted to set up my own business. When the opportunity arose, I thought, yep, let's have a go at this. It's been an interesting journey, I would say, over the last 21 years. But it's been extremely rewarding, particularly being in the assessment industry, which I think it's a wonderful industry to be in. My job title is a rather grandiose role, President and CEO. Comms has got project managers who work on people's projects, and we recently moved into a new office, so there's still a few things to sort out there. But we're right in the centre of Epsom, which is located around about 35 minutes by train from central London, right on the edge of the countryside. So it's a really nice combination and a lovely area to be.
Absolutely. Well, it sounds delightful, especially around this time of year.
Oh, yes.
So, Sue, since you brought it up, and since I always start by trying to hear a little more about our guests' testing story, how did you get started in this world of testing and assessment? What's your journey been in our wild world of testing?
Well, my background is in languages. My undergraduate degree was in German and Russian. I can also speak French. I'm learning Spanish. With a combination of these languages, I can read and understand quite a lot of different European languages. So languages have always been a real passion of mine, and communicating with people in other countries and other cultures is absolutely vital. I remember a former German chancellor saying one time, he said, when I want to sell something to you, I must speak your language. But when you want to sell something to me, you must speak to me in German. So that really summed up how important it is to be able to communicate in other languages. So I spent many years working for a US company in the information industry. They were based in Ann Arbor in Michigan. And I then joined a company that produced psychometric assessments. So that's where I learned all about the science behind assessments and what it takes to produce a good, valid and reliable assessment. I then worked for a translation agency, so that gave me an insight into the whole world of translation. So after that, I really thought, yes, it's time for me to branch out and set up my own business. And so I chose to set up a translation agency. And it seemed logical to me to bring together my knowledge of languages and my knowledge of the assessment industry to really focus on what I felt was very important. So I think the assessment industry is a very highly specialized industry where you really need to understand assessments before you can do anything, particularly translation. You need to produce translations that are equivalent in another language as far as possible, bearing in mind the vagaries of different languages. And so I knew what it took to produce a good assessment in English. And so I was determined to apply the same rigor when it came to the translation, localization, and adaptation process.
Well, I think, doesn't that say a lot there in terms of what we ask of translation organizations when they're in this space? I think that is probably a request and ask that is understood, less than understood, as well as undervalued by a number of folks. So getting back to your organization, really, tell me more about your focus. And you really began to elaborate on this, but your role in testing as an organization that gets brought in for this well, this one slice that can become, of course, much bigger when you think about the entirety of an organization's communications or marketing materials that sometimes I know you get drug into as well. So,
Oh, yes. Yes, we're doing quite a lot in there at the moment. I think it's very important. People understand what translation is, but I think a lot of people don't really realize what localization and adaptation are, and they're an absolutely vital part of the whole picture. So I'd like to give you an example to illustrate what we mean by this. We were working on a clinical assessment translation battery, test battery into Hungarian. And that involved giving a respondent a stimulus, which was to take a $10 bill, go into a store and calculate how much change they would be getting from that $10 bill. So the local currency in Hungary is the forint. And so you'd start by localizing the US dollar into forint. However, given the fact that the exchange rate is around 350 forint to the US dollars, simply localizing it to 10 forint and expecting it to work just wouldn't happen. People just would not go into a store with 10 forint. So therefore, you also have to adapt the amount so that it's meaningful to the target audience. So I think since our founding, we've branched out into many other areas to try and to provide as comprehensive a service as possible, because it's not just translation that people need in this sector. There's things like subject matter expert reviews. So we provide subject matter experts in all sorts of different subjects, different languages. We also do things like websites, marketing materials, as you mentioned, frequently asked questions, contracts, and a whole variety of different things. So it's not just the translation side of it, but a whole load of other services as well. And increasingly nowadays, we're being asked for voiceovers and subtitling services as well. One of the things we've got a massive database of translators who specialize in different subject areas, so that we can provide, services in a wide variety of different subjects. And we've done all sorts of things like veterinary science, dentistry, HR, crane operation, welding, arborology. So you can see all the different areas that we have to actually cover. I think also one of the things that's very interesting to look at is some of the challenges that we actually face when we're doing translation work. You can find something that's written very, very cleverly in English, for example, like the 12 Ps of sales and marketing. Okay, that's fine. It sounds really good in English. But when you try and put it into another language, I think we manage 6 in French, 3 in German, and none in Finnish. So that's one of the things that we have to deal with. I think there's also things like when you're doing verbal reasoning tests, for example, the body text could use the word exploitation. And then when you come down to the distractors, they may decide to use some words which have got the same number, quite a similar number of letters that are the same at the very beginning. So you could have exploration, for example. Well, you can't necessarily do that in other languages. So that can cause us some challenges as well when putting together the distractors. And then looking at the cultural side of things, we do quite a lot with SJTs. And obviously, some things just cannot be culturally adapted to a different country. So, for example, if you're in a sort of command and control society, then asking people how they would stand up to their bosses just would not be acceptable at all, because they just wouldn't understand the question. So the localization and adaptation is very important also when we're doing things like SJTs.
I love those examples. And I think actually, to a certain extent, Sue, that's a good reminder to those of us who produce exams to abide by the KISS principle. And of course, the more particularly when thinking about internationalization of an examination and translation localization, simpler is better, both from a language, verb, vocabulary. Actually, I might ask if I could, if you could talk, and I know you do sometimes, quite frequently, actually, to those who make examinations. If I'm sitting in an organization and I'm thinking about creating something that ultimately I'm going to need translated and localized, I mean, is there a couple key things that you would tell me going into the venture to recall, as opposed to what you tend to get on the other side of the equation?
Well, I mean, I think I see our role very much as an education and consultation role. I think that's absolutely vital because basically we want people to be successful when they're taking their exam to another country. But what I do say to people, if they come up to me at the booth and they say to me, yeah, we want to translate our exam into Portuguese, I say, okay, let's just step back a moment and think about this. There are so many things you need to really think about and put in place before you have any chance of being successful. Because I've had some people say, yes, we've had it translated and it wasn't successful. Okay, then, so I will ask them various questions. For example, I think it's absolutely vital that you have an in-country partner if you want to actually offer your exam in another language in another country. But as well as making sure that the person knows the scene, they know the country, they know the culture, they know how successful it may be, you have to be very, very careful when you're actually putting your contract together with any local partner. So, for example, you really need to make sure that you have a deal where you are sharing things, sharing resources, sharing the financial side of it. Because if you just finance everything, then there is absolutely no incentive for the local partner to go out there and sell your training and your examination. So that is very important indeed. So the joint deal, making sure that you've got incentivization for the local partner, I think is very good. But there's also other areas to look out for. One of our clients was offering their exam in Russian. And so they had a local training partner in Russia. So that was absolutely fine. But they actually used that in-country partner to grade the exams. Surprise, surprise. Every candidate got 100% because the training company didn't want it to be seen as if they couldn't train people properly. So it's, there's an awful lot of things that you need to look out for like that. I mean, I don't want to scare people off because I think that there are great opportunities out there, but market research, and you can use US government organizations to help you with that. Local in-country embassies offer an awful lot of help like that. So make sure you do your market research, make sure that there's a niche for you to go into and that the actual subject matter that you're offering is important in that particular area.
No, I think that's great guidance, Sue. Interestingly enough, I was actually at a conference focused on international associations in Washington, D.C. last Thursday and Friday. And we were talking about exactly some of these trends. And the first thought after the presentations I went through on Friday were, and make sure they're not on the sanctions list. In any event.
Absolutely.
So all that aside, I'm sure this has probably not been your favorite topic over the last year and a half, but I'm curious to get your perspective on, the effects of AI in all of our space. We've talked about AI on a couple of our podcasts, and certainly it's been talked about seemingly ad nauseum at some of these conferences this year. A lot of headlines have been made in our space concerning the role of translators in certain organizations within assessment and some of how that's been supplemented or in some cases replaced by AI. So very curious to hear, how do you see your organization and your staff evolving now with AI increasingly in the picture?
I think we're still very much in the hype phase. I think that people are thinking AI is going to take over everything and human translators won't be necessary anymore. Well, I think that AI has certainly made significant strides. Its impact is undeniable. And in fact, I think the translation business has actually been well ahead of the game in that we've been using machine translation for many, many years now. The quality's improved, but I think that there are still many issues that you need to look out for. I'm sure that everybody's heard of the bias and the hallucinations that can come up in AI translations. Well, not just in translations, also in English. So you have to really be very careful with that. But I think that the role of human translators remains absolutely vital, especially in contexts requiring nuanced understanding, as in assessments, cultural sensitivity, exams, and creative adaptation, as in things like marketing. The vast majority of our work is with high-stakes materials like assessments and exams, and also security and confidentiality are absolutely vital in that particular area. So, of course, we've been checking out all the possibilities of AI to see how we can leverage this to improve the efficiency and the effectiveness of what we offer. We'll continue to monitor the progress. But we've been working with a specialist translation tool that leverages the power of LLMs together with customer-specific translation memories and glossaries. And this tool also ensures that the data for each client is kept separate in its own silo. And therefore, you can ensure the confidentiality and the security of each client's data. We've also been doing some AI-based translations we've been sent some AI-based translations by some of our clients. And our impression so far really hasn't been great. I think it's important to emphasize as well that if we get poor quality machine translation, it's very, very difficult to actually get the translation up to the quality that's required. Even with thorough machine translation post-editing, it's almost impossible. If, garbage in, garbage out is the expression. Mm-hmm. And, unfortunately, that's the way it is. So, I mean, how do we see our role evolving in this world? I think it's a very powerful tool that can enhance what we offer. It can handle repetitive and straightforward tasks very easily. And I know in the assessment business and the exam business, it provides a really great sort of starting point when subject matter experts are writing items, for example. It can come up with maybe some different ideas that the SMEs have never even thought about in the first place. So, I think it certainly has a very good role to play in the industry. I think that we really need to make sure that the humans focus on the more complex and creative aspects of translation. And if you combine that together with the power of AI, then you can certainly increase productivity. I think that in terms of quality assurance, there are tools out there that measure the quality of the AI translated materials. And in some cases, they claim really, really good success rates. I have yet to be convinced, particularly in the assessment business. I think that human translators are absolutely vital for reviewing and ensuring that things are accurate in the assessment industry. I also think that an area that AI really, really struggles with is with cultural nuances and idiomatic expressions, for example. So basically, those require a deep understanding of the target culture. Human translators have that understanding, and that's why we've been using them with assessments for years. Also, I think it's sometimes actually quicker and more efficient to use human translators from the start, rather than spending a massive amount of time trying to correct something that really doesn't let itself be corrected. So I think that going forward, we certainly see that there are areas that have potential for AI translation. Things like report text, where it's probably not cost effective. If you've got a massive report database, it's probably not cost effective to have the whole thing translated. Mm-hmm. But using AI and then using machine translation post-editing, because you can train it with key terms, with glossaries, all that kind of thing. So I think that you can actually produce something that's reasonable in that area. We've also been experimenting with SJTs because they tend to have fairly straightforward text. So, we're seeing how that's going to turn out. It also very much depends on the languages involved. When you're talking about what we call FIGs, French, Italian, German, Spanish, there's a huge amount of information out there to train an LLM. But when you're talking about things like, what was the one we did for clinical? Oh, yes, a language called Hiligaynon. You heard of it, Rory?
Got me there, Sue.
I hadn't actually, until we got the request to do this. It's one of the languages of the Philippines. With something like that, there just isn't enough data out there, which is in Hiligaynon on the internet, to really train the LLM appropriately. So I think it will improve as we go forward. But as I said, the accuracy and the quality leaves a bit to be desired at the moment. Cultural sensitivity, it really doesn't get. Data privacy and security, as I mentioned, we've been working with this company to ensure that we can keep the client's data secure. But also integration of existing workflows into what we do. The Association of Translation Companies in the UK has set up an upskilling program. And so basically, everybody in the company is going to do a 10-week course on AI in the translation business and all the different possibilities for it at the moment, how we can use it. And it's really going to train all the staff up. So we're starting that very soon. And I'm really looking forward to doing that.
Well, I really appreciate a couple things about what you said, Sue. I mean, number one, there, of course, is always the temptation to be a Luddite when these things come about and stick your head in the sand. But I'm loving the fact that despite, some of the headlines, you're driving in full steam, but with the appropriate pragmatism, if you will. Two, I think your response actually exhibited perfectly something that we've been preaching around the industry, and indeed has just been evidenced in ATP's new publication around the use of AI within assessment. Yep. And that is, you perfectly described a human in the loop model. Yep. And that just brings me joy. Because that is so critical, and we've come back to that point, I think, again and again, and your answer just exemplified it.
Yes, I think we can't do without humans.
I would
at the moment, at least.
Well, and I think also just illustrating the difference in utilizing AI to translate an email message that you're exchanging with your pen pal in another continent versus using it in such a high stakes arena. Yes. I think you've really hit that well. Well, moving on from the AI topic, I'm curious to hear, what other trends are you seeing this year in translation and localization? Are you seeing trends toward, let's say, other languages that are popping up in vogue as companies are growing in one way, shape, or form? And are there different needs that you've seen popped up more heavily here in the last year?
Okay, in the translation sector, I think there's a growing demand for specialized services, things like transcreation and technical translation. Now, with the technical translation, obviously, exams come in many, many different subject areas. So you have to be specialist in those particular areas in order to do a good translation. But transcreation is very interesting because that involves adapting content creatively to maintain its impact and its message in a different target audience. We're doing a lot of that at the moment for the medical area. And it's very, very important to make sure that even for countries which are, say, German speaking, that you have it localized for Austria, for Switzerland, and you use different people for that kind of thing so that people respond to their own accent rather than thinking, oh, it's just another thing in German. We see a lot of increase in video and audio translation. Because there's so much more media out there. Think about podcasts, all sorts of things like that. And so I think people want to engage global audiences, and you need diverse content formats to do that, not just blogs, but podcasts, videos, how-to demos, all that kind of thing. I think multilingual search engine optimization is growing in importance as companies reach out to global markets. Having multilingual SEO is becoming crucial so that you can optimize the search engine so people can actually find you in a different country. Voice recognition is a very interesting area because I'm sure you've come across the increased use of voice assistants and voice search. There's a very interesting video that's doing the rounds at the moment. And I won't go into too much detail because it is rather rude, but it's extremely funny. And basically, these two Scotsmen go into an elevator and it has a voice-activated system there. So please state your floor. Okay, so they went 11. I'm sorry, I don't understand. Please state your floor. 11. And it just went on in that vein and it was just so funny and they were going absolutely nowhere. So I think you have to use these things with a little bit of caution. And also, nowadays you get these AI-powered chatbots and support tools that are multilingual. You just say, I want it in a different language, and it'll do that. But I'm sure you've come across this as well. I find it so annoying when it says, I don't understand your question. How am I supposed to phrase it?
No, absolutely.
You're asking about languages in vogue. I think that areas which are becoming of greater economic importance, so the languages such as Arabic and Hindi and languages like that, but languages like Chinese, Spanish and French are always in our top 5. And I think they have been for all the 21 years that I've been running comms. And I think in terms of credentialing organisations, I think a lot of credentialing organisations are really realising the value of offering their training and exams in other languages. And that's not just in different countries, but also internally within the US, because we do quite a lot of translation into different languages for the US, particularly in areas where safety information is very important. And you may have native speakers of other languages like Vietnamese or Chinese or Korean or languages like that. And it's very important for them to understand safety procedures to ensure safe working. So we're doing translations for organizations which only sell within the USA. I think that what people are looking for in terms of a translation partner is a real emphasis on cultural competence. So basically understanding the markets that people are going to be selling into. They're looking for specialization and expertise. So they're looking for people who have a real understanding of their individual subject, whether it's veterinary science or, as I said, HR, or we've been doing social media exams. So all sorts of things like that. And I think they're also looking for companies which can use AI to help improve the effectiveness of the translations. But there are also ethical considerations to take into account. So I think credentialing organisations are very hot on ethical considerations and ensuring also that companies adhere to strict data protection standards. Very important. And I think coverage of emerging market languages, because if you take the languages of Europe, we don't tend to translate exams into so many of the European languages because the whole idea of professional organisations is much more entrenched in places in Europe, whereas outside Europe, maybe they haven't got that whole sort of idea or concept of professional organisations, and they prefer to use an American or a British organisation, which is long established in a particular subject area. So I think that those are the main things that I've been noticing.
No, makes complete sense, especially in terms of, your mention of the languages coming up. Not surprised to hear Arabic on that list, as I think that's become a very commonplace request these days.
Yep.
Well, Sue, for my last question here on a very different note, as an entrepreneur myself, formerly, I know the challenges that come with starting and managing your own business, and sometimes the madness it creates. So congratulations, first off, on CommsMultilingual being now over 20 years, 21 now, and just for those in our industry who, may be considering their own entrepreneurial adventures or endeavors. Just curious as to, what advice would you give before someone takes that plunge? And, what do you wish someone had told your younger self at that time?
Oh, wow. Lots of things. I think one of the things, there's a lot of unique challenges, but also massive opportunities that are out there. You can't do everything yourself. That's one of the very first things I'd say to people, particularly at the very beginning. The very first thing to do, I think, is to understand your market. Choose your market very, very carefully. What gap in the marketplace can you actually fill? I mean, maybe if you've been working for another organization, you're thinking to yourself, if only we had that in place, that would help my work. So look out for that kind of niche that you can fill. And you must conduct thorough market research to understand the needs and also the pain points of your customers. Where are the gaps? And I think that'll help you to tailor your services to the specific requirements, and also to help you to stand out from the competition, which is vital. I think networking is something that's absolutely crucial in our industry. So you need to build relationships with key stakeholders, key decision makers, industry experts, and also other entrepreneurs, because it can be very lonely sometimes. And so having networks of other people who've been in the same situation as you, who've set up their own business, can be very helpful if you're just sitting there thinking, I don't know what to do next. Just picking up the phone and calling somebody who's been there, that can be very helpful indeed. I think also you have to really focus on quality. There's no point in going in at the low end of the market. You need to focus on high end, I believe, the very quality end of the marketplace. And you need partners to help you do that. So you have to look out for skilled partners who can help you in areas where, you haven't necessarily got the skills. I've got an absolutely amazing operations director, Sonia, who has the ability to tell somebody off and make them laugh at the same time. And that's something I certainly haven't got. And I've fully recognized that. So getting people like that who can complement your own skills, because you can't do everything, and you can't be skillful at everything. I think that's vital. Obviously using technology and keeping on top of technology, which is very difficult. Providing excellent customer service. That's absolutely important. It's not that you won't have issues, because there will be issues. There's always going to be problems and issues that need to be resolved. But it's how you resolve those that makes customers come back to you again and again, because they know that everything's going fine, that's great, but if there's issues, you'll sort it. People will rely on you for that. I think plan for growth as well, having a clear vision of where your business is going. But also, when you're actually involved in a project, you mustn't neglect the marketing side so that you make sure that your next project is coming in. Otherwise, it's a roller coaster and you have peaks and troughs, and that doesn't help your cash flow either. So you've got to be thinking about the next project while you're still working on the current project. And I think just seeking feedback and learning. So I think starting and managing a business can be challenging, but with the right approach, I think it's almost also incredibly rewarding. One of the things I've found the most rewarding is that people who've worked for me over the years are still friends. They've made a lot of lifelong friends through working for Comms, and I'm incredibly proud of that. I think that's a wonderful achievement. So if you're thinking about it, my advice is do the right research and then go for it.
I love that advice, Sonia. And first off, to call out Sue, excuse me, I have Sonia on my mind now. I was just going to say to call out, having worked with her before, she's a gem. So I could not agree more with your assessment, Sue. I think your mention of quality at its core, as well as the people element at its core that you've illustrated through those points, I could not agree more. And I think that is certainly something to be more than proud of with everything you've built. Well, Sue, I am really appreciative of you taking the time in the midst of what is indeed such a busy schedule, and spending it with me and those of us who watch the Strasz podcast. So thank you so much for taking the time and giving some of your wisdom here on this important topic. Greatly appreciated.
You're very welcome, Rory, and thank you very much for asking me. I appreciate the opportunity.
But of course, and for those who are have stuck with us to the end here, we'll look forward to posting a new episode in about 2 weeks. So stay tuned and take care.
Bye.